We are in the thick of patch 14.5, and that can mean only one thing. Welcome to our new and updated tier list covering the best champs in the current meta, hopping straight into it with top lane. With the nerfs to Frozen Heart, we do see more itemization changes and stylistic changes. The main things to note is that top lane fighters are so much stronger than the rest of the playable champs, which allows for much more quick-paced and explosive matchups to exist. As previously highlighted from our past videos, the buffs to bruiser items have brought these champs into a much better place. Until they are nerfed, they will be stronger than the majority of other champs that can possibly be played up in the top lane. None other than Aatrox is currently the king of top lane, and if mastered, you can find ways to win in a ton of different scenarios. The champ himself is also extremely versatile, being a fast assassin, potentially, with the more lethality-focused build, or a raid boss drain tank. He has pretty decent matchups into many of the other meta top laners, and the ability to almost invalidate certain ADC picks, which is a top laner's dream. We would also highlight the state of Wukong, who's seen a bit more play and win rate in 14.5, but overall, he is just about met expectations where he won't completely be reshaping the meta. It's just that now he's allowed to exist in the game again in top lane, and we will be keeping a closer eye on this champ for the future. Next up, if you haven't already signed up to GameLeap.com, oh yes, then the time is now. We have hundreds and hundreds of LoL guides authored by professional coaches and challenger players covering every element of League, from all 5 champ roles, lane micro and macro decision making. If you are hard stuck and tired of getting dumpstered, then sign up below right now by clicking the link at the top of the description box to jumpstart your path to challenger, goddammit. With that said, back to the tier list. Staying on the top lane for just one more thing, it was addressed that many people were confused with the placement of champions like Fiora and Irelia in our last tier list. Overall, these champions are fine, but suffer heavily from their need for skill expression and much more complicated team fighting, which is currently what the game is all about. The goal that they are looking to accomplish in the game can be very hard, and they have pretty punishing matchups with lane bullies like Darius and Renekton. They also suffered a lot when the item changes came out, because they no longer have reliable split-pushing stat check items like the old Hullbreaker, and a majority of their items are more health or healing focused over pure resistances. They are much more one-dimensional and struggle to win the early phases consistently to reach their 3-item split-pushing dreams. Overall, the mid-meta has shifted to match what the dominant junglers currently are. It has almost always been like this, and with the dominant junglers being fast-fighting AD bruisers, the mid-meta has shifted to champs that can play faster and match the pacing of their jungle counterparts consistently. In our recent tier list videos, we have emphasized many champs that can play in these higher-paced environments and find unique angles to facilitate early leads. With this in mind, when we do talk about champions like Aurelion Sol, who generally wants to play on set scaling timers, you have to understand that the champion has to be inherently stronger than the meta curve, and that is why he deserves to be highlighted again. It is largely a misconception that he inherently doesn't wish to fight. Instead, he wishes to have the fights be on his own terms, based on his own scaling. He has strong fighting tools and capabilities if set up properly, but because of his inherent setbacks, for a lot of players, this can be underwhelming and makes the champion seem to be worse than he is. A champion, in contrast, that fits the pacing of the game well is Karma mid. She pairs well with skirmishing junglers because she enters the game advantaged with the strength of Mantra. Inherently, she has strong trading and zoning tools as well as good fighting tools, which allows her to actively dictate the pacing of the game and adapt to the scenarios that come by depending on the pathing and playstyle of her jungler. And be certain that Karma is no support. In many cases, she can pump out the most damage on the team if you were able to chain Q people and reach your next mantras. As per our previous 14.5 tier list, everything has been going about as expected in the ADC role, the only adjustment being that we made a mistake on the increase of Kog'Maw's play rate and win rate based on the changes that were made to him. He's definitely in a better spot, and his placement should reflect this. The main champion we've got to highlight is still gonna be Kai'Sa, just because of her overall versatility and ability to scale while also being a strong early game champion. Because of her adaptability, she has seen a lot of traction recently, and Poke Kai'Sa is very strong into a lot of the meta champs because she is able to absolutely warp the game space around her range while still having pretty strong skirmish in close range scenarios. Unlike other bursty poke champions, Kai'Sa has insane escape tools and the ability to also adapt her build in order to fight off unwanted pests that can actually get near her. Another strong champion is Smolder. As predicted, predicted, the recent changes were just strictly buffs to an already controversial champion, just because of how uninteractive it feels to play into him. At a certain point, no matter what happens in the game, Smolder will always become relevant, which hard warps the game in a pretty toxic way towards scaling and mitigation, because no matter what, eventually you will have a chance to win in lower elos where the game time is on average about 20% longer. Smolder is currently dominating down there, and it is seen as a free way to get a cheap win. To make matters worse, the champion is also quite easy to play with its high mobility and survivability. Just whatever you do, stop building AP. So overall, our 14.5 tier list predictions that were made for the champions in the jungle are about hitting the mark, and their ability to in fact fight anything they want in the game if piloted properly shows how the game is being shaped in the current meta by the jungle role. One thing that is clear though is that we may have overvalued the Sunfire changes at least a bit. Many of the tank junglers have not seen a crazy amount of meaningful play rate increases, and in fact, many of the bruises that were highlighted continued throughout the patch to increase in both win rate and play rate. One champion that we will hone in on real quick is that of Xin Zhao, who just seems to not be affected by anything that is brought against him. Champions get buffed to counter him, and somehow he still wins. His itemization gets overall nerfed due to unhealthy interactions with him, and he somehow adapts and finds new builds. Overall, this champion's early extended fighting is unmatchable because of his passive and the lowering of cooldowns on his Q autos. He's able to get multiple rotations of spells off in the early game, and if executed properly, he's able to take any fights he finds on the map. He also does well in many mid-game fights because of how strong his ultimate is in front-to-back scenarios. It essentially nullifies the enemy carry's damage while active and forces the fight to be an uneven footing because the enemy is unable to attack and affect the champ. Yeah, and finally the support role, because, you know, we gotta cover support eventually, right? The Seraphine rework is still basically inconclusive as to whether or not it's a net positive for Seraphine. In support, some new higher elo builds are showing up, but we think it's mostly just about the intrigue of the champ rather than top tier players spotting any serious viability. Overall, we may have overvalued the strength of enchanters a little bit in our previous tier list, especially in a solo queue environment when the game is being paced much faster due to what the meta is turning out to be this season. And unless the pacing of the game gets slower, then champions that are meant to control the lane or stop the enemy's plays will be continuously weak unless they are able to fully warp the game around them. If you are looking for some quick LP from the support role, we would suggest just locking in Rakan. He's a versatile champ that when mastered can almost always be useful in a multitude of situations. He provides good reliable peel, strong engage, and a playable lane phase if you are able to abuse the strength of his Q in the early game. And that's about gonna do it. Did you agree with our list? Probably not. If so, drop some champs down below that you feel we are sleeping on in patch 14.5. While you're down there, make sure to go on ahead and click the link in the top of the description box to head on over to GameLeap.com and start your path to Challenger by signing up and unlocking access to the hundreds of Challenger guides that are lying in wait just for y'all. Thanks again, guys, and I'm gonna catch y'all in the next one.